Hey there. Thank you for joining us for this episode of 13. Before we get started, as always, we want to thank our new patrons. D is for Devil, Kira Dueck, Chad Heinrichs, and Emily Tripati. Thank you so much for your support. And welcome to the Pod Fam. If you'd like to hear your name in audio, then you should check out our Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/pod13 or click the link in the show notes. And just a reminder, we're always on the lookout for story submissions. We get them from all over, and we're on a few lists, but we especially love it when we get submissions from our listeners because, well, you know the show. Today's story is Island of Joy, written by D.H. Parrish. Are you ready? Sit back, turn down the lights, and now, on with the show.
I used to play classical piano. Unlike many kids forced to practice against their will, I loved it. I was good at it too, really good. Good enough that I was going to study performance and make a career out of it. This was thanks to the generosity of Miss Eris Opfel, a coal mining heiress who wanted her family name associated with something other than union busting and black lung disease. Our town hosted a regionally prestigious annual piano recital, the Opfel competition. The recital was limited to, quote, boys and girls in good community standing and of suitable moral character. They had to have resided in the state for at least 5 years and had reached their 16th birthday, but not yet their 18th. The prize money was substantial. $2,000 for first place, $500 for second, $100 for third, and $50 for the next 3. That's why most kids entered. And I certainly wanted the cash, but what I really wanted was to list the award when I applied to music school. Helena Paris, who'd won it 3 years prior, had gone to Juilliard. And there was another kid whose name I don't remember that attended the Curtis Institute. Our state is on the smaller side, and I was familiar enough with the circuit to know I only had one real competitor, Sage Palmer. Sage and I were the same age. We'd attended the same elementary school and had been in the same 4th grade homeroom. We each started playing piano after our 7th birthdays, and it became the defining passion for both of us. Given our background and shared interest, you might have expected us to become close friends. You'd be wrong. We parted ways after 5th grade when Sage's parents enrolled her in a fancy private school. We both started with the same music teacher, Mr. Nestor, a kindly old gentleman who also taught music at the public high school. Mr. Nestor would tell our parents how truly gifted we both were and how lucky he felt to teach us. Sage's parents decided that Mr. Nestor was right. Sage was too talented for him and needed a more prestigious mentor. And while we both began by learning and practicing on a piano at school, Sage's parents thought that she deserved more and bought her a grand piano, a Steinway no less. I, on the other hand, was stuck plucking the keys of a cheap Samick upright for most of my childhood until we finally upgraded to a used Yamaha. I'm not sure if it was nature, nurture, or a combination of the two. But Sage grew up to understand that the gift she received meant she was special, and she behaved accordingly. At recitals, she would insist on personal accommodation for seating or rehearsing. She was never gracious in victory or defeat. She never offered a fellow performer a compliment that wasn't backhanded.
You're so daring. I would have never thought to prolong Bach like that with so much passion.
Every word that fell from her lips was intended to shatter someone else's ego. Cruel remarks, cutting deep with their sharpness. In short, Sage was what some would call a witch with a capital B. To be fair, she was talented. Really, the only other person in my age range as talented as me. And so, we would face off at the Opfel competition. And I think she viewed the stakes the same way I did. I chose to play Liszt's Liebestraume No. 3. Dream of Love is a beautiful piece about love and loss, one that would let me show my range and emotion. It was musically advanced enough to demonstrate virtuosity without being so complex that, were I to have an off day, I might falter. Sage chose Debussy's Island of Joy. The Island of Joy tells the story of travelers venturing to the birthplace of Venus, where they will find true love. It's a showy piece, employing a wide variety of techniques. Ravel once described it as, quote, an orchestral reduction for the piano because of its rich layered sound. It uses the entire keyboard and ends dramatically on the lowest note on the piano, 4 A's below middle C. Unlike most competitions and recitals, we received the timed list of performers and pieces for the Opfel competition a week in advance. The order was supposedly random, but we all knew the expected quality of participants was ranked in reverse order. So whoever went last was usually expected to be the best. I was scheduled second to last. You can guess who held the coveted final spot. In the week leading up to the event, I practiced obsessively. I dreamed of playing, of Liszt, but I couldn't escape the feeling that Sage had the upper hand. Unless I was perfect, and Sage was not, she would emerge victorious, and I would be stuck in second. The only thing that left me more distraught than the thought of her crocodile tears at my loss was its likely effect on any potential music school admission or scholarship. I needed to do more, but what? The solution came to me 2 days before the competition. It was not the most honorable solution, but Sage was never honorable either. Could I, who had always been a good girl and who had always done whatever I'd been told, not stray a little this once? Sage had all the resources she needed. I didn't. If she lost, a little humility might do her some good, might make her a better person in the long run. If I lost, the world might be deprived of what I knew I could become. My actions were in the interest of something far greater. The morning of the performance, I arrived at school early and went into the auditorium where the piano had been set up. My advantage in attending the high school where the performance was to take place was having my own set of keys to the room. If I were caught or if anyone asked, I could just say I was there to practice. Making sure that the coast was clear, I unlocked the door and slipped into the dark hallway. It was lit only by the red exit sign. I let my eyes adjust and then made my way to the stage. To the piano. I pulled open the top of the piano. I found Mr. Nestor's leather-wrapped tuning kit, and then a tuning lever. Sage had the only piece that would play that low A, so it was a simple matter for me to over-tighten that string until it registered as a B flat, the most discordant adjacent note possible. The last note the judges would hear Sage strike would sound like an awful mistake. With my mission accomplished, I replaced the tool and left the room with no one the wiser. When I returned to the auditorium for the recital later that morning, it was already half filled. Multiple performers, most of whom I recognized, sat in the front row. The boys were in suits, or at least white shirts and dark slacks. The girls were in formal dresses, some that would no doubt later double as their prom gowns. Sage hadn't arrived yet. She came in as she always did, after everyone else. Just minutes before the start, she made her entrance, wearing a white dress that exposed her pale shoulders. Her black hair had been expensively set in long ringlets that gave her a classical Roman look, as if arriving for triumph. Trying to be polite, I rose to greet her, but she ignored me. She walked past without stopping so she could present herself to the 3 judges seated at a special table just in front of our row. Then, the performances began. The ones before us were mostly fine, but I knew, and I knew that Sage knew, none of them were in our league. One boy, playing Chopin's Fantasy Impromptu, got lost in the middle, and he kept repeating himself, clearly unable to progress to the end of the piece. I felt bad for him, but Sage smiled at his misfortune. The boy ultimately just had to pull his hands away and abruptly quit, returning to his seat with silent tears running down his cheeks. My time finally came. I poured my soul into the performance, and I played perfectly. I was never so happy when the final notes faded and the applause began. As I returned to my seat, I watched Sage, who was politely clapping. I don't detect any note of uncertainty on her part. She still thought she was going to win. And her being oblivious to the fall that was coming made me giggle. Sage took her seat before the piano, raised her arms, threw her head back with an unnecessary dramatic flourish of her curls, and dove into Debussy. She executed those first 5 minutes flawlessly. But as she ran through the arpeggios in the recapitulation, the third and final portion of the piece, I waited with anticipation. I was ready to travel to my own little island of joy. I knew what was coming. Da-da-da, da-da-da, descent and crash. The wrong note. That awful final B-flat. It filled the room, seeping into its every corner. Even those who understood little of music could tell it was off. A foul smell polluting the air. The audience offered only weak applause. And I knew I had won. But Sage didn't leave the bench. She just stared at the instrument before her, uncertain of how it had betrayed her. Once the clapping died down, she played the final note again, registering that sour note. I could see her brow furrow, suspicion registering on her face. The piano top had been opened for the performance, and Sage thrust her head under it to investigate the instrument's innards. Playing that low note for a third and final time. A loud crack, like a gunshot, rang out. It startled the audience, and for a few seconds, the room fell deathly still. And then, Sage broke the silence with an ear-piercing scream. She yelled twice more before she turned to face us. We collectively gasped. The piano wire had snapped under increased tension and whipped back into Sage's face, crudely slashing her forehead and piercing her left eye. Blood poured from its empty socket. The better part of the eyeball remained attached to the wire that had plucked it out, and a white blob now dangled precipitously over the open soundboard, swaying back and forth like some perverse jack-in-the-box. One mother, who happened to be an ER doctor, rushed to the stage and coaxed Sage to the ground. Taking charge of the situation, she ripped off her own blouse and used it to hold pressure. She barked orders to others to call 911 and find a first aid kit. Several of the other performers, who had front row seats to this gory spectacle, became nauseous and vomited. Another two fainted and required medical attention of their own. Sage's mother passed out too. Paramedics soon arrived, put Sage on a stretcher, and whisked her away. The whole thing only took less than 10 minutes, but it seemed to take a lot longer because Sage screamed and wailed the entire time. Sage was hospitalized for 9 days. Even though they initially expected to discharge her after 1 day, she developed a series of rare and rapidly progressing infections that required courses of IV antibiotics and wound debridement, all of which led to horrible facial disfigurement. Sage's parents made sure her face was bandaged the whole time so she couldn't see how bad it was. One night, though, Sage decided to look. She went into the bathroom and removed the protective gauze layers. When she saw the misshapen horror that her face had become, she found a scalpel and slit her own throat, collapsing to the floor and bleeding out before anyone could save her. I didn't visit Sage in the hospital. I wanted to. I really did. I was going to apologize, to let Sage know that I had no intention of causing her this kind of pain. I just wanted the prize so I could get into a good music school. But I found excuses each day why I couldn't go. And then it was too late. I didn't go to her funeral either. I rationalized that my being there might cause the family more pain. To the extent they cared at all, they certainly didn't need that. A few days after the funeral, the high school placed Mr. Nestor on indefinite leave. He was the one responsible for tuning the school's piano, and he was made the scapegoat for the mishap. Mr. Nestor came to my home for a lesson about a week later. Always a thin man, he had become sickly gaunt. Usually impeccably dressed in a crisp button-down and a bow tie, he now wore a rumpled white shirt, open at the collar, with several brownish stains. He smelled like he hadn't bathed. Mr. Nestor sat next to me as I played, but he seemed 1,000 miles away. Whenever I asked him, what should I play next, he just said to do whatever I wanted. I had never before had a lesson with him that wasn't filled with his colorful commentary, positive or negative, as my fingers roamed the keys. But that night, he offered nothing more than the occasional, "That's fine." As he was leaving and my mother handed him a check, he thanked us for continuing to have him as a teacher. Most of his other students, after learning what happened, had opted to find another instructor. That was the last time I saw Mr. Nestor alive. He was found hanged in his apartment 2 days later. The police found the check my mother had given to him still in his pocket. The Opfel competition judges waited until a month after that fateful recital to deliver a verdict. They announced that Sage would have won, but as she was dead, they were unable to give her the award. Accordingly, I was named the winner. It was not how I had envisioned my victory, but victory it was. But it all began to unravel 1 month later. My parents had hired me a new piano teacher, Mrs. Cassie. But, not having started with her yet, I went back to a piece that I had played a few years prior and loved, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. I felt joy as my fingers pressed the familiar notes of its beautiful opening. I was maybe 10 seconds in, though, when I heard a raspy voice. It said,
Adagio.
I stopped and looked around. I was sure I was home alone, but I called out to see if anyone was there. No answer. Then I started playing again, and again came the voice, which whispered directly into my left ear.
Adagio, Amelia. Adagio.
I turned my head toward the sound and screamed. Sage was there, in a blue hospital gown. The left upper quarter of her face was grotesquely swollen and covered with scabs and oozing ulcers. Her left eye was missing, only a fleshy red recess visible within the socket. Her hair was caked and matted, with no trace of those long dancing curls. A bloody gash ran across her neck, from her left ear to the midline of her throat. Sage didn't move. She just smiled a toothy grin. I got out of there, dashed to my room, and locked the door. I frantically called my mom, who told me she was already driving home from work and would be there in just a few minutes. I waited in terror until I heard my mom come home. She shouted out that she was checking around the house and then finally arrived at my door. I let her in, and she sat down with me on the edge of the bed and hugged me. She stroked my hair as she reassured me that I must have been imagining it, that I was understandably still under stress from everything that had happened, and that it would all be okay. I tried playing again the next night when both of my parents were home. I was apprehensive until I made it through the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata. As I played the allegretto and its joyful arpeggios, I began to feel unhappy until my head, following my fingers, turned to the right. Sage was back again. She stood next to the bench, glaring at me. I yanked my hands from the keys and clasped them to my chest. I held my breath as she watched me. My mother noticed the abrupt stop and rushed into the room. She was to the left of the piano. "Don't you see?" My mom asked what I meant. I turned my head left to look at my mom and pointed to my right where Sage stood. My mom hugged me and suggested I maybe stop for the evening. The next night, again with my parents in the house, I started the Beethoven piece once more. I kept my eyes shut at first. Maybe this would be the way to avoid whatever I was imagining. About 4 minutes in, I let my head fall back so that I faced upward, and then I opened my eyes. There was Sage, defying gravity as she lay against the ceiling, striking an almost Christ-like pose. I put my hands down to my cheeks, like that guy in the painting, and tried to scream. No sound came from my lips. Sage spoke.
"What's wrong, Amelia? You look like you've seen a ghost."
I ran, crying, to my room. My parents got me an appointment with a psychiatrist later that week. Dr. Birdsong was nice enough, I guess. After several costly sessions, he told me that I wasn't psychotic or schizophrenic. Rather, I likely had what's called an acute adjustment disorder and was having visual and auditory hallucinations in response to a traumatic event. I'd told him, of course, that I felt some guilt over what had happened, although I couldn't bring myself to confess everything. He ascribed Sage's manifestations to survivor's guilt, although I suspect he knew I hadn't told him the whole story. He also wondered if I wasn't at some level worried about pursuing a career in music, and if so, this might be my way of extracting myself from this predicament. I asked him if there was some pill he could give me to make the ghost go away. He told me that while a pill might help with anxiety or depression, there wasn't one for what I was seeing. I asked him if he believed in ghosts. He told me that he didn't, but that if I did, there wouldn't be anything a psychiatrist could do about it. The apparition persisted. No matter what I played, no matter when I played, Sage would appear and taunt me. I once tried to play through it, to ignore her, but that didn't work. As I continued, despite her words, I felt cold fingers encircle my neck and squeeze ever so slightly. I understood the threat and stopped. So, with great reluctance, I announced to my parents that I no longer wanted to become a concert pianist. They were understanding. They only wanted what was best for me. And if I didn't have that desire anymore, then it wasn't worth pursuing. I think they were a little relieved, actually. We cried and hugged, and it was the end of my childhood dream. But when I stopped playing, Sage stopped appearing. I applied to and got into state, having spent most of high school expecting to go into music performance. I had no idea what I wanted to study. I took intro calculus because why not? And I discovered that I loved math. After our midterm, I received an email from the professor who taught the class, asking me to stop by her office. I was sure this couldn't be good. The class had over 500 people, so there was no way she even knew who I was. I showed up as requested, and after a moment's hesitation, knocked twice. The professor opened the door while she was speaking on her phone. As she wrapped up her conversation, she waved me in to sit down. She then turned her attention to me. She confirmed my name. My heart was racing, as I had no idea what was going on. Had I failed? Was I going to be accused of cheating? Neither. The professor told me that congratulations were due, that I had earned a perfect score on her midterm, the first one she'd given in 10 years of teaching this class. She told me that I should be proud and asked if I'd considered majoring in mathematics. Relieved, I broke into a wide grin, telling her that I would now. She also said that if I wanted an advisor, she would be honored to take on that role. She put out her hand and I rose to grasp it. I'd just found my new calling. And then I heard that awful, creaky whisper.
Congratulations, Amelia.
Sage appeared, standing, or rather floating, just behind the professor. She looked the same, clad in the same stained hospital gown. She slow clapped at me and then shook her head, letting me know this wasn't ever going to come to fruition. I felt the blood drain from my face. The professor must have noticed, because she asked if I was okay. I stuttered that I was just a little overwhelmed, glancing at my watch so I could look away from Sage. I told the professor I was going to be late to another class. I thanked her and then dashed off. I never spoke to that professor again. I finished the class, but I didn't major in math. I never even took another math class. I never took anything else I thought I might like. I was too afraid of the consequences. I sleptwalked through most of the next 2 years, living without living, telling everyone I was fine, scared to take delight in much of anything. At the start of my 3rd year, I met Noah. Neither of us had really been in a relationship when I literally bumped into him at a party my roommate dragged me to, knocking over the beer he was drinking. We hit it off right away. He was smart, kind, and hot. I fell for him hard. And while he also had an almost full-time job working at the lab, we managed to see each other every day. After 1 month, we happened to be walking by the apartment building where we'd met. He stopped and pulled me toward him. He held me in his arms, looking into my eyes, and told me that meeting me at that party was the best thing that ever happened to him. And he told me he loved me. I felt tears of joy falling down my cheeks. I closed my eyes as we kissed. When I opened them, I was going to tell him I love him too. Instead, I gasped and recoiled in disgust. Hovering behind Noah, her chin almost resting on his shoulder, was Sage. Pus from her open wound seemed to drip down onto Noah's shirt, although he took no notice. Her right arm reached around his neck, her hand held taut and claw-like, ready to take her nails across his exposed skin.
Your choice,
Sage hissed, and I saw what I was certain was a single drop of blood well up where one of her nails grazed his cheek. I told Noah that I was sorry, but I was feeling a bit ill and I needed to go home. He wanted to escort me, but I declined his offer, saying I would see him later. I dashed off, and I never spoke to Noah again. I didn't respond to his calls or texts. I told my roommate to let him know that it wasn't him, but I couldn't see him anymore. After 3 weeks, he finally stopped contacting me. I realized after Noah that I was doomed. Wherever I'd try to find joy, whenever I thought I might achieve it, Sage would be waiting. I was condemned to an unhappy existence. This was the cosmic punishment for my crime. When all seemed darkest, it came to me a week later how I could rid myself of the specter haunting me. I felt a profound sense of relief the evening after my epiphany as I walked across campus to the piano practice room I had reserved. I went into the small soundproof cubicle and locked the door behind me. I sat down in front of the walnut-colored upright. I pulled out of my backpack the sheet music I'd printed out, and I arranged it on the music stand. It had been long enough since I'd tried to play Liebestraume that I didn't think I could do it from memory. I set down the kitchen knife that I'd brought with me next to it. I started to play. I was rusty, but my playing still sounded beautiful. It didn't take long for Sage to arrive. She glided in through a wall and sat down next to me. When I felt her presence, I stopped, holding my hands suspended over the keyboards for a few moments before slowly moving them to a rest on my lap. I then picked up the knife with my right hand and held its serrated blade inward, pointed toward my face, my left eye. I grasped my right hand with my left to steady it. I looked at Sage, and she nodded approvingly. She placed her hands over mine, and together we thrusted the knife in. The pain was excruciating, but I felt joy.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of 13. If you like what you heard, stop what you're doing and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. This has been Island of Joy, written by D.H. Parrish, narrated by Bridgett Freeman. Additional voices by Brooke Jennett. Music composed by Liebestraume. Editing and sound design by Brooke Jennett. Additional assistance from Ian Epperson and Mason Amadeus.
That's me.
Our producer-level patrons are Tattooed Fox, Jessica Yaramillo, Rhiannon, Sean Geary, Anthony Diaz, Amy Harper, Jackie K, Chantel Payne, Jake R, Jennifer Gatlin, V, and Dog Mom DVM. Thank you guys so much for your support. Click the link in the show notes to learn more about joining us on Patreon. And check us out on social media. You can find us most places under Pod 13. And you can join the Facebook group for 13 Podcast. Just look for the logo, and you'll find links in the show notes. Have you seen our new merch yet? We've got specialty designs for this year's fall series and all kinds of other goodies too. Go to imaginary.click/merch or click the link in the show notes. If you'd like to submit a story to be performed on the show, or if you'd like to contact us about anything else, you can get in touch with us at info@13podcast.com. You'll find submission guidelines and other info on our website, 13podcast.com. And you can find that in the show notes too. Bridgett Freeman is always watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.